Um, we are going to start with an invocation of the Bodhisattvas. This month, for our morning bell chant, this is what we're going to be reciting. It should be, a copy should be in all your booklets. And after we do the invocations of the Bodhisattvas, we will observe noble silence until service begins. We invoke your name, Avalokitesvara. We aspire to learn your way of listening in order to help relieve the suffering in the world. You know how to listen in order to understand. We invoke your name in order to practice listening with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will sit and listen without any prejudice. We will sit and listen without judging or reacting. We will sit and listen in order to understand. We will sit and listen so attentively that we will be able to hear what the other person is saying and also what is being left unsaid. We know that just by listening deeply, we already alleviate a great deal of suffering in the other person. We invoke your name, Manjushri. We aspire to learn your way, which is to be still and to look deeply into the heart of things and into the hearts of people. We will look with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will look with unprejudiced eyes. We will look without judging or reacting. We will look deeply so that we will be able to see and understand the roots of suffering and the impermanent and selfless nature of all that is. We will practice your way of using the sword of understanding to cut through the bonds of suffering, thus freeing ourselves and other species. We invoke your name, Samantabhadra. We aspire to practice your vow to act with eyes and heart of compassion, to bring joy to one person in the morning and to ease the pain of one person in the afternoon. We know that the happiness of others is our own happiness, and we aspire to practice joy on the path of service. We know that every word, every look, every action, and every smile can bring happiness to others. We know that if we practice wholeheartedly, we ourselves may become an inexhaustible source of peace and joy in our loved ones and for all species. We invoke your name, Kashitagarbha. We aspire to learn your way of being present where there is darkness, suffering, oppression, and despair, so we can bring light, hope, relief, and liberation to those places. We are determined not to forget about or abandon those in desperate situations. We will do our best to establish contact with those who cannot find a way out of their suffering, those whose cries for help, justice, equality, and human rights are not being heard. We know that hell can be found in many places on earth. We will do our best not to contribute to creating more hells on earth, and we will help transform the hells that already exist. We will practice in order to realize the qualities of perseverance and stability so that, like the earth, we can always be supportive and faithful to those in need. We invoke your name, Sadapada Buddha. We, we aspire to learn your way of looking deeply with the eyes of non-discrimination in order to see the true qualities of others. Whenever you meet anyone, you may respectfully and say in appreciation, I respect you deeply. You are a future Buddha. We vow to look deeply into ourselves, to recognize the positive qualities that are there, to accept and to love ourselves. We vow only to water positive seeds in ourselves and those around us. By doing so, our thoughts, words, and deeds will give rise to self-confidence and acceptance of ourselves, our children, grandchildren, and all those we know. We vow to look deeply with eyes of non-discrimination to see that the joy and success of the other person is also our joy and success. We vow to behave and to speak with humility and respect. We vow to practice loving speech to help people who understand themselves see that they are wonders of the universe. We know that only when we are able to transcend the barriers of a separate self shall we be able to transform the superiority, inferiority, and equality complexes that realize true happiness and freedom. We are going to begin the incense offering. If I could have my incense lighters, and we have a sheet in the in your booklet we can follow along with. All right, we say together. In gratitude, we offer this incense throughout space and time to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. May it be fragrant as earth herself, reflecting careful efforts, wholehearted awareness, and the fruit of understanding, slowly ripening. May we and all beings be companions of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. May we awaken from forgetfulness and realize our true home. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see everyone smiling faces. The sun's out, new and old people. It's good. It's good to be here. My name is Tongin Su. I'm facilitating this service. Actually, Tongin Su will be delivering the Dharma talk from Portland, Oregon. Before we begin, let's stand and greet each other silently, and then we will start with our morning chants. Page 7. Three refuges. I go for refuge to Buddha, my deeply awakened mind, the living source of understanding and compassion, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I go for refuge to Dharma, the path of mindful living, leading to healing, joy, and enlightenment, the way of peace, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I go for refuge to the Sangha, the loving and supportive community of practice, realizing harmony, awareness, and liberation, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I am aware that the three jewels are within my heart. I vow to realize them. I vow to understand living beings and their suffering. I vow to cultivate loving kindness and compassion and to practice joy and equanimity. I vow to live simply and sanely, content with few possessions, and to keep my body healthy. I vow to let go of all worry and anxiety in order to be light and free. I am aware that I owe so much to my parents, teachers, friends, and all beings. I vow to be worthy of their trust, to practice wholeheartedly, so that understanding and compassion will flower, and I can help living beings be free from their suffering. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. To the next page, page 8, we will chant the Heart Sutra. Dhamma Prajna Paramita Hridaya Sutra. The Bodhisattva of great compassion from the deep practice of Prajna Paramita received the emptiness of all five skandhas and delivered all beings from their suffering. O Shariputra, form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form. Form is emptiness, emptiness form. The same is true of feeling, thought, impulse, and consciousness. O Shariputra, all dharmas are empty. They are not born nor annihilated. They are not defiled nor immaculate. They do not increase nor decrease. So in emptiness, no form, no feeling, no thought, no impulse, no consciousness. No eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. No form, sound, smell, taste, touch, or objects of mind. no realm of sight, no realm of consciousness, no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, no old age and death, no extinction of them, no suffering, no cause of suffering, no cease from suffering, no path to lead out of suffering, no knowledge, no attainment, no realization, for there is nothing to attain. The Bodhisattva holds on to nothing but prajna, paramita. Therefore the mind is clear of any delusive hindrance. Without hindrance there is no fear. Away from all perverted views, one reaches final nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future, through faith in prajna, paramita, attain to the highest perfect enlightenment. Know then the prajna, paramita, is the great Dharani, the radiant fearless mantram, the utmost supreme mantram, which is capable of allaying all pain. This is true beyond all doubt. Proclaim now the highest wisdom, the prajna, paramita, gate, gate, hara gate, hara samgate, bodhisvaha. Gate, gate, hara gate, hara samgate, bodhisvaha. Gate, gate, hara gate, hara samgate, bodhisvaha. Dhamma prajna paramita hridaya sutra. All right, Tongin Su.
Hey, Gaji Su. Can you hear me okay?
I think, can we all hear? Okay, good.
All right, awesome.
I think I might turn this.
Cool. Well, like Gaji Su said, my name's Tongin Su. My given name is Caleb. I'm fine with either. And like he said, I'm coming to you all from Portland, Oregon this morning. The sun is just starting to rise here. And recently, Kunga Nima asked me to talk to you all today about the rise of Mahayana Buddhism. This is, after all, an American Mahayana temple, right? And well, what does that mean, right? What does it mean for the temple to be a Mahayana temple? And, you know, I recognize that to some of you, this term may be completely unfamiliar, while for others, maybe it's just a little fuzzy or indistinct. So today, let's investigate the rise of Mahayana within the broader context of the Buddhist movement more generally, and then what makes Mahayana distinct. And I think by understanding this vast tradition or really group of traditions, we can understand more about our own temple and the identity of the temple today. So we're going to flash back thousands of years and start with Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha, right? He lived and died sometime between the 6th and 5th century BCE. Dates are a little fuzzy for Siddhartha, but the consensus seems to be that he died sometime between like 483 and 400 years before the Common Era. And the rise of Mahayana came roughly 4 or 5 centuries later, around the turn of the first millennium. And that's a long time. To put that into perspective, the First World War wrapped up just about a century ago. This country, the United States, is only about 245 years old. If we flash back 400 years ago, we didn't have airplanes or all the numerous other inventions that we kind of have today. So just think about how much has happened over these past 4 centuries, and then just put yourself back into the Buddha's time and imagine how much must have occurred between his parinirvana, or his death, and then the rise of Mahayana, right? So we're going to look at what those kind of 4 or 5 centuries looked like. What did mainstream Buddhism look like before Mahayana came around? And there are 3 main events that are really key, I believe, to understanding this story. Those would be the first Buddhist council, the second Buddhist council, and then the reign of the Indian king named Ashoka. So during the Buddha's life, he amassed many followers in a big spiritual community called the Sangha. It's the title we still use today to kind of refer to, this group of Dharma practitioners. He established an institutional order of male and female monks who were called bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. They still use that title in many traditions today. And we know that shortly after the Buddha's death, there was a first Buddhist council. So all the disciples got together. They, to the best of their memory, recited his teachings and his discourses, and they compiled them together into a group that we now call the Pali Canon. You can read the Pali Canon today. We've got a number of books from it in our library downstairs and in the teacher library. And the Pali Canon consists of not just discourses by the Buddha, but also rules of ethical conduct made for the monks. And these teachings were actually only transmitted orally for about 400 years until they were written down in Sri Lanka, roughly around the same time that the different schools we now call Mahayana started to bloom, right? So the fact, though, that we have Mahayana Buddhism today and Theravada Buddhism today, which I will get to later, I think that suggests there was some kind of split, right? And we know that the first schism in the Sangha occurred at the second Buddhist council, which occurred roughly 100 years after the Buddha's parinirvana. And at this particular council, it was convened because there were 2 groups that were trying to come to a consensus about rules of monastic discipline, but they were unable to agree. And after that initial schism, we know that there were many schools that were flourishing. Most of them are basically extinct today, but there was kind of a divide between kind of which camp you fell into after that council. And we know that one of these 2 groups, they were called the Sva Viravadins, they gave rise to more conservative schools, including Theravada. And Theravada, I believe, is the only one that survives to this day. It's helpful to remember that although we think of things as being very neat and discreet, the past is a very messy place, and our understanding of it is often messy too. We know that a diversity of different traditions stemming from the Buddha and his followers were flourishing at this point. This is about 200 BCE, and that there were different, some differences in practice and belief from place to place. But on the world stage, the Buddhist movement was still a pretty small phenomenon, and all of this changed with the rise of King Ashoka. So about 200 years after the death of the Buddha, there came a king named Ashoka, and he conquered nearly all of the Indian subcontinent. So if you look at a map of India today, King Ashoka conquered almost all of it and kind of established what we even think of like India, right? It was a violent rise to power. So then, interestingly, after killing his brothers and his enemies, he meets a monk and is really struck by these teachings from the Buddha on nonviolence and compassion, decides to drastically change his ways. He sponsors the construction of wells, the planting of medicinal herb gardens and fruit trees, especially along roads between cities and villages, so that even if somebody is a simple traveler or homeless, that they could have something to eat. He built stupas, monasteries, temples, and universities for Buddhists, places where monks could go train and study the Pali Canon. And he also sent missionaries to Thailand, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Greece, and even Egypt. So through Ashoka, we know that Buddhism was spread way beyond the Indian subcontinent, which only increased the sort of differences in practice and belief from region to region. Buddhism seems to have this very fluid approach that when it enters new regions, there seems to be some sort of negotiation in which the Dharma becomes kind of woven into the native beliefs, oftentimes, that are already there. So we're going to flash forward now another 200 years to the turning of the first millennium. Buddhism has been spread far and wide across the classical world, and we know there's a number of different schools. And in some monasteries, there are some monks and nuns that start to reject the narrow way that Buddhism has been taught. We know that everyone accepted doctrines like the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, liberation from samsara through nirvana, but these dedicated followers sought to create a Buddhism that was both more accessible to lay people and one that had a bigger definition of liberation, or a bigger definition of nirvana. So in the words of Professor Paul Harrison, whose research I'm indebted to for this talk. Hi, my love. Pardon the interruption. I've got a toddler with me. Hey. So Professor Paul Harrison said, some people said that mainstream Buddhism is all fine and well, but it doesn't go far enough. They believe that people need to not just liberate themselves from suffering, but also liberate others and become Buddhas too. So around this time, right, we're talking like year zero, right? We see the introduction of these new sutras called the Prajna Paramita texts. We chanted earlier, right, with the Heart Sutra, all about Prajna Paramita, right? And that principle is front and center in all of these new sutras. And in fact, the Heart Sutra comes from the Prajna Paramita texts. And these new Buddhist scriptures were written in Sanskrit rather than Pali, which is interesting to note. So a different language is being used to write the scriptures. There are certain meditative innovations that are realized by practitioners and introduced. We know Buddhist groups start using mala beads, which hadn't happened yet. And I think most importantly, the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, is seen now less often as a mere man, but now as something greater, maybe even a cosmic principle. The Buddha takes on this new life. We see the introduction of these things called the Jataka tales, which are these fascinating stories of his different past lives and what he did in those past lives, right? So we get a more mythologized idea of the Buddha, what he did, why he did it, right? And I think at this point, it might be helpful to talk about like what is in a name, right? What even is Mahayana? And it's a compound word actually that's made from two terms, Maha, meaning great, big, expansive, and Yana, meaning vehicle. And a frequent metaphor used in Dharma is to describe the spiritual path is that of crossing a river, to reach the shore on the other side, with the shore being nirvana, or the cessation of samsara, getting out of cyclical existence, conquering greed, anger, and ignorance, right? And to reach that shore, you're going to need a vehicle. You have to cross that river somehow, right? So maybe you need a raft or a boat. So Mahayana is the biggest boat, right? It's the great boat tradition, and it's big enough to fit all sentient beings on board, no matter their idiosyncrasies or individual proclivities. Like no matter where you come from, there is something in Mahayana for you, right? And although there are many schools that are considered Mahayana and they have different beliefs and practices, there are a few key features that kind of recur throughout them all, right? And those features would be universalism, the bodhisattva path, skillful means, and emptiness. So let's start with the bodhisattva, right? Before Mahayana came along, the goal of the Buddhist path was to become an arahant or arhat. It's it literally means a worthy one, but the term is used to describe someone who's realized nirvana and will no longer return to the endless cycle of death and rebirth. So this is still the term that is used in Theravada to describe what they aspire to become, right? They want to get out, to conquer one's own individual entrenchment in the suffering that is existence, right? So contrast that with Mahayana practitioners who want to pursue the path of a bodhisattva. In fact, we have a group right now that are studying and training to take their bodhisattva vows. But what is a bodhisattva, right? The term literally means a wisdom being or one who is waking up, one in the process of waking up. And before Mahayana, it was a term just used to talk about the Buddha before he woke up. So Siddhartha Gautama was a bodhisattva up until the point where he sat under the Bodhi tree and realized complete and unsurpassed enlightenment. But now it becomes a term used to describe beings that are following the path of the Buddha, waking up, and most importantly, helping others to wake up too. Because that's what the Buddha did. He didn't just want to wake up himself, but afterward realized, I have to bring this wisdom, this realization to other people. And that's really the big turn with Mahayana, that to realize enlightenment for one's own sake is good and it is noble, but it would be better to help others achieve this goal too. And that's where we come to the universalism of Mahayana. We want all sentient beings to wake up. All sentient beings have the capacity to wake up because they all have Buddha nature. All beings have a latent seed of awakening waiting to sprout. It just needs the right conditions and causes for that seed to become a lotus, right? And in fact, many schools believe that one day all beings will wake up. It's just a matter of time, right? And becoming a bodhisattva means you're kind of like helping reach that kind of historical, that conclusion, waiting at the end of history, that all beings wake up and realize enlightenment. So non-Mahayana schools usually hold that only monks and nuns can reach nirvana or awakening, right? But Mahayana schools believe that lay people, regular people like you and me, can also attain awakening, right? In fact, there's a whole scripture called the Vimalakirti Nirdesa Sutra, which centers upon a lay practitioner who philosophically bests many of the Buddha's greatest disciples through a series of debates, right? And one of the points of that sutra is to show that being a householder or being a lay person, being a Joe, like just an average Joe like myself who works a day job and has a child, right? It's just as valid a path as that of a full-blown renunciant, like just as valid as being a monk who's committed to certain vows. But us lay people can't maintain the same lifestyle or vows that many monastics can. So in Mahayana schools, we see an explosion in different meditative techniques, rituals, and methods called skillful means. And previously, skillful means, or upaya, referred to the skills with which the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, could tailor his discourses to any being. So no matter who they are, he was able to teach them the Dharma. But under Mahayana, upaya also came to mean not just the Buddha's special skill, right? But it came to mean special techniques of meditation, prayer, and recitation that could help any being wake up. So for example, right, the Rinzai Zen school uses koans, which are these like enigmatic little riddles that are meant to provoke awakening through their contemplation. There are many schools that recite mantras and the names of Buddhas. Vajrayana schools use mandalas, visualizations, and also special ritual tools. So basically, no matter what your individual interests and proclivities are, there's a skillful means that can help you wake up, right? And lastly, let's talk about emptiness just a little bit. For that, we'll turn to Nagarjuna. It's kind of one of the most important figures in the growth of Mahayana. He was an Indian philosopher who lived sometime between the 1st and 2nd centuries CE. So he's a very instrumental figure, kind of the growth of Mahayana. And he founded a school called the Madhyamaka, or the Middle Way School. And through his discourses, he propounded something called shunyata, or emptiness. And we know the Buddha himself discussed emptiness when talking about anatta, or not self. But in Siddhartha's understanding, it seems to mostly be about how the self is cannot be pinned down to any one thing, right? My selfhood cannot be found in my clothes, my job, my relationships. There's no single place where I can locate my Calebness. But Nagarjuna took this a little bit further, saying that this applies not just to us and our own inability to locate ourself in like a single definite point, but rather there is no thing that exists that has a core essential self. All things are empty of their own intrinsic existence, which sounds, I know, probably kind of flowery, but the best way to put it is if you imagine with me like a car. A car is composed of many different parts. It's got 4 wheels, it's got an engine and a catalytic converter, all these different parts and pieces. And occasionally those have to be swapped out and changed, right? Which begs the question, well, what makes the car the car? Or where is the car's carness, you know? So nowadays, Mahayana stands in contrast to Theravada. And at times, Theravada is referred to as Hinayana. You may use that term used sometimes, but I would advise against using it because it is a pejorative. No Theravadan refers to themselves in that way because Hinayana means lesser. It means insufficient or poor. One of my teachers actually taught me that if we really were to translate it accurately, we'd have to use a curse word. So in general, we should avoid using the term Hinayana. So instead, we'll take Theravada on its own terms. And the name itself means the teaching of the elders, conveying the sense that this is the most ancient school, attempting to adhere as closely to the Dharma as first formulated by the Buddha Siddhartha Gautama. Therefore, ethical conduct, monastic discipline, and the study of the Pali Canon is paramount. And they believe in all core Buddhist doctrines like the Four Noble Truths, the law of karma, dependent origination, right? And Theravada is still flourishing today in mostly Southeast India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos. But Mahayana, on the other hand, lives on today through many schools such as all the different schools of Zen, all the different schools of Vajrayana, Pure Land Buddhism, and Tiantai school, just to name a few. And Mahayana is the dominant form found in Tibet, China, Japan, Mongolia, Korea, and now also the Americas and Europe. And over the past century, I want to highlight, there have been numerous points of dialogue and intersection between both Theravada and Mahayana. For example, Thich Nhat Hanh, as a young teenage monk, was trained in both traditions and drew upon both in his teachings. And the Dalai Lama, throughout his life, has also met with many prominent Theravada teachers throughout his life. I think at the end of the day, what I want to hammer home is that whether one comes from a Mahayana background or a Theravada background, we have much more in common than we do differences. And I know in this talk, I've really briefly glossed over a topic that we could easily spend a whole semester long course at a university talking about, right? But I hope it's given you a better understanding of where we come from, a sense of lineage, a sense of standing in a stream that goes back thousands of years and will hopefully continue thousands of years into the future, thanks to our own efforts, actions, and continued practice today. So that's what I have about the rise of Mahayana. I recognize we've covered a ton of different topics, and if you have any questions, by all means, let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions if we have the time. Gaji Su.
Do you have a question, sir?
I was wondering what the relationship between like the beginnings of Mahayana and Zen, like that section of Buddhism was.
Yeah, definitely. So Zen is considered, a Mahayana school. We know that it came from a school in India called the Chan school, which is literally just means, it comes from a Sanskrit word meaning jhana, which means just meditation, from meditation, contemplation. And that's kind of the front and center emphasis in Zen schools. Zen is just the Japanese word for the Chinese word for the Indian word of meditation. And all Zen schools they trace their lineage back through a line of what they call direct transmission from student to teacher. And there's a beautiful story that says that this started during a particular sermon of the Buddha in which he did not say anything. He merely held up a flower, and one of his followers, Kasyapa, saw the flower and instantly achieved enlightenment. And there's this notion of this silent transmission from one person to another, this recognition that kind of goes beyond words. And we know that it traveled from India through Tibet to China to Korea to Japan, and then eventually to North America. Does that answer your question? Cool.
Any more questions? Please raise your.
So, what is the purpose of waking up? And does it matter if one wakes up? And what should one do if and when one does?
As for the last one, very interesting questions. Thank you. I can't tell you what to do or what one ought to do. If I myself, I think, were fully enlightened, I could answer that question. If I understand you correctly, the first question was, what is the purpose of waking up, or kind of why bother waking up? Hello, my love. Well, I can mostly just speak to my own story, right? I think at the end of the day, that I can only draw upon my own experience. And for me, the purpose of waking up is to escape the sort of, not escape, but to get out of my own head and realize my own connection and the value that I can have to other people. I don't feel like I quite put that right, but to me, the purpose of waking up is to escape my neurotic tendencies, to focus only on myself, and to realize how there is such a greater role that I can play in the lives of others if I can stop looking neurotically at my own feet, or being mired in my own obsessions, my own greed, my own ignorance, or my own warped desires. That on the other side of that threshold lies a Caleb, right, that is more noble, more virtuous, and less focused on himself. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Any further questions?
Hello.
I have a question. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
I can hear you okay.
Okay. This is Amy. I'm joining from Zoom. First of all, thank you for the teaching. I've really enjoyed this talk. You mentioned that it's important for us to, follow our path and go towards enlightenment for ourselves. But you also mentioned that it's just as important, if not more important, to help others. And maybe I heard that wrong, but I kind of always thought that Buddhism, because there's other religions that they go on a mission and they spread the word of their own religion. I guess I never thought of Buddhism like that. I've never really tried to help enlighten others or do anything like that. If people ask me questions about my religion as a Buddhist, then I definitely talk about it, but I wondered if you could just expand on that a little bit so I can understand it better.
Certainly. So I mean, to the point that that enlightenment is better sought for the benefit of other beings than one's own self. That's kind of the whole idea underlying Mahayana, that one should not just pursue liberation for their own aims or goals, but for the sake of other beings, because we're all kind of stuck in the mire of samsara together. My love, you are so silly. Hey, can you go find Osito? Where's your bear? Can you find your bear for me? No. But yeah, we don't really proselytize, do we, as Buddhists today? There have been numerous Buddhist missions in the past, and like I said, King Ashoka sent missionaries even as far as Greece, possibly influencing many important Western thinkers, right, like Pythagoras and Plato. But the way I see the role of the Dharma playing in my life, in terms of like, I'm not trying to convert anybody, myself, to the Dharma, unless they're fully interested. If they want to ask questions, great. But I more believe that in my own example, in living my life, that should hopefully be the best case someone would need to possibly convert religions themselves, right? Because even as the Dalai Lama has said once, it is a big thing to change your religion. Does that kind of answer your question, Amy?
Yes, thank you. So basically we can spread the word and we can talk about it, and we're doing it for the sake of all beings, for our, we're trying to find enlightenment for the sake of all beings, and I get that, but we don't go out and, shout at the mountaintops or stand on a corner and hand out pamphlets or anything like that, is what I'm
No,
getting.
we don't hand out chick tracts.
Right.
I mean, you're welcome. I recall living in Chicago several times, meeting monks of a particular order who would raise funds by selling bracelets. And if people wanted to talk to them about the Dharma, they would tell them about it. But they were just selling bracelets to help raise funds for their temple. And that's the closest I'd ever witnessed to some form of like Buddhist evangelism, for lack of a better word, before that.
Tongin Su, thank you for the talk.
Thanks, Kunga.
I just wanted to maybe add on that idea of how we help relieve the suffering of others, and we can just think of it as a really kind of materialistic, mundane thing. Just pursuing in our daily life any actions or activities that we think would benefit other living beings. It can be just, smiling at someone to help them have a better day. In my job in hospice, my whole career is built around working with people at end of life, helping to relieve their physical, mental, and spiritual suffering. So saving all beings can seem like a really huge thing to do, but it really, it's really just simple acts that we do every day. Greeting each other, supporting each other, supporting our relationships with our families.
Yes.
raising our children, maintaining our relationships with our neighbors in positive ways. I mean, all those simple kind of daily activities are ways that we kind of work towards that big ideal of just liberating other beings, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, totally. I like how you highlighted your own particular career choice, which I'm not trying to say anybody should change their job right here, right now, but that is one part of the Eightfold Path is right livelihood. And like in my own job, I work for an organization that promotes literacy and provides free materials and programs to help 4 and 5-year-olds learn how to read. And I chose that job because I knew that what I was doing was a net positive in the world, right? So even in like I think our livelihood, we can look at it as, well, does what I do, bring about the relief of some suffering of other beings? Yeah, thank you, Kunga.
All right, Tongin, so we have enough time for one more question.
My love, come back. Come
Hi.
back, my love.
I was gonna ask. I'm assuming this is on. I think it is.
I'm sorry, my toddler's running out into the hallway.
You're fine.
Thank you all for your patience.
Hi, I was just going to ask if you could maybe, I'm not sure if there's a solid answer to this, but maybe explain the connection between emptiness, so shunyata, and how that, kind of ontological position connects to the bodhisattva path. Whereas what's described in the Abhidharma is more of the arahant way. I was just wondering if you see any connection between emptiness and pursuing bodhisattvahood.
Yeah, I will answer with a quote from the Tibetan sage Milarepa, who once remarked that emptiness engenders compassion. When one realizes just how fundamentally our being is intermeshed with that of all other beings, our dependence on other beings in the soil and the sun and the rain for our ability to eat our daily food, right? When one realizes that level of interconnection, one cannot help but desire to act compassionately toward other beings. And that is the path of the Bodhisattva.
Thank you, Tongin Su.
Thank you, everyone, for your wonderful questions.
All right, we have time for a short meditation. So if you prepare yourselves for that, just be a silent meditation. We bow. All right, I think it's time for announcements. March events. We have our Grand Rapids board meeting. Sangha members are invited to observe every third Sunday of the month from 11:30 to 1 p.m. and it meets at the temple or via Google Meet. We have a Buddhist-based recovery meeting that happens here on Mondays at 6:30 is meditation, 7th meeting. Wednesdays is at the Alano North Club, and on Fridays it's at the temple in the morning. For more information, you can get with me or you can see our website at zengr.org. So I'll have for our announcements. Does anyone else have any other announcements?
Did you have your hand raised, ma'am?
Oh, I have one.
Yes.
You go first. Almost like forget. Oh, the camera's over here. Well, hello everyone. My name is Josh, and it's my turn to do the dawn announcement. I'll keep it pretty quick. You've heard this before. On your way out the doors today, just empty your wallets in the Donna box, like everything. Like credit cards, cash, like we want all of it. Not kidding. But anyway, in all seriousness, they're never gonna let me do this again. But this temple does operate entirely on a nonprofit basis. Everything here happens because of your generosity of time or contribution. So in keeping with the practice of Dana generosity, there are many ways to help out. There are, as I mentioned, the Dana boxes on both ends of the temple. There's a QR code on them. You can scan that. For those of you watching online, there's a drop-down box that you can click on or something like that with a link to donate. You can also go to grzen.org/donate. If you're interested in volunteering your time, feel free to ask around. There's many ways to participate. So thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Announcement over here.
Coming over.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you. We have an intro to meditation class coming up in April. It's on April 15th from 9 to noon. All the information, I believe, is posted on the website, and registration is open. Registration is open. So if that's something you'd like to join us for, we'd love to see you.
Thank you. And before we do our gathas, one more over here.
You don't need the mic?
And tomorrow is our temple cleaning day.
Oh, it is.
And benches will go to the curtains here to the left of the bottom of the there. The black chairs go at the end of that little room, and all the gray chairs go downstairs. I'll do that. People will come in.
Thank you. And keeping up with our tradition of joys and concerns, if you have any joys throughout the week or any concerns, things that have been bothering you or anything like that, I like to open the floor. Over here. You're good. You're good. No problem. Thank you for running the mic.
Good morning, everyone. My concern, in a way, is also a joy, and it might be hard to see it. As I was coming to temple today, I was getting ready to get on the freeway, and this big F-150 in front of me ran right into a rabbit. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh, I got to get to temple, you know, but then I had to stop myself and think of the well-being of this animal. And I couldn't stop where I was because it's a freeway entrance. So I made my way back around, and I found a nearby parking lot, and we keep towels in the back of our car for our dog when we go on walks, and immediately grabbed that to go and see if I could help this animal. And you know, the possibility is always that they pass on, but there's also that possibility that you can get them to a place where maybe they can get some help. And this animal was beyond that. And while it's really easy to attach to that notion of feeling like I didn't do enough, I also had to recognize that there was a sense of unconditional being. This animal had Buddha nature. I have Buddha nature. And that driver who hit it has Buddha nature. And in thinking of how we can help people wake up, the joy comes from the encouragement that this rabbit's death brought to my practice. So thank you.
Thank you.
Joys and concerns, anyone?
Any other joys or concerns?
I have both, just like Z said. Last week, our dear friend died. And that was a heartbreak because besides being the best friend for over 50 years, she was far away. But my joy is that I had the opportunity to recite the contemplation of no coming and no going at her bedside via the cell phone, on her chest, on speaker mode. So.
I just have a concern, and the concern, my dog passed away a few weeks ago, and it was really hard to come to terms with. He's 15 years old and everything, but the joy I can see in that is he had a long and wonderful life, and he brought us a lot of joy. He will be missed. So thank you. Anything else?
I have a joy to share. I adopted 3 cats yesterday.
Woohoo!
That's awesome.
You're never gonna wake up on time again.
All right, we'll close with our closing gathas. You'll stand. It should be on page 9. Together. All unskillful actions ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thoughts. Now I atone for them all. Vast is the robe of compassion, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Buddha's teachings for the benefit of all sentient beings. All beings, one body, I vow to liberate. Endless blind passion, I vow to uproot. Dharma gates without number, I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha, I vow to attain. We will put it in the middle and bow to each other. And we appreciate if you can help clean up on that petition, and we invite you to come downstairs. We got water and an assortment of teas. Join in the conversation. Thank you. You guys have a great